Code P00AC is a specific diagnostic trouble code indicating a low input signal from the intake air temperature sensor 1 on bank 2. When we say low input in this context, it usually translates to the computer thinking the intake air is extremely hot. Here is why that matters. Your engine needs to know the air temperature to manage combustion. Hot air is less dense and increases the risk of high combustion temperatures, which leads to harmful nitrogen oxide emissions. The IAT sensor uses a 5-volt reference signal. The system is designed so that as temperature goes up, resistance goes down, and therefore the signal voltage drops. So if the computer sees the signal voltage drop near zero, it interprets that as an incredibly high temperature, potentially around 300 degrees Fahrenheit. If the engine has just started and is cold, the computer knows 300-degree air is impossible and sets code P00AC. This code applies to bank 2, the side of the engine without cylinder 1. Symptoms might be subtle, but you could hear a pinging or knocking sound from the engine under load, or you might fail an emissions test due to high nitrogen oxide readings. The most common cause is a bad sensor that has shorted internally. However, it could also be a short to ground on the signal wire, which pulls the voltage down to zero, mimicking a high temperature reading. It could also be a damaged connector, or in rare cases, a failed powertrain control module. To fix this, you need a scan tool. Hook it up and look at the IAT data stream. On a cold engine, the reading should match the outside air temperature. If it is reading maxed out at a very high temperature, pop the hood and inspect the connector for signs of melting or damage. If it looks okay, unplug the sensor entirely. Watch the scanner. When you unplug the sensor, the circuit opens, which means resistance becomes infinite. The scanner reading should immediately drop to its lowest extreme, usually -40 degrees Fahrenheit. If the reading drops to -40 when you unplug it, congratulations! You have confirmed the wiring and computer are fine, and the sensor itself is internally shorted. Replace the sensor, and you're good to go. However, if you unplug the sensor and the scanner still shows 300 degrees, or a very high temperature, the problem is not the sensor. It means the signal wire is touching the chassis ground somewhere between the connector and the computer, essentially tricking the computer into seeing low voltage. You will need to visually trace that wire to find where the insulation is rubbed through and repair it. If the wire is perfect and not shorted to ground, but the reading stays high, the internal driver in the engine computer may be at fault. Electrical shorts can be tricky to find if they're buried in a harness. If you unplug the sensor and the reading does not change, and you cannot find visible wire damage, it's time to hand the keys to a professional electrician or mechanic who can trace the circuit without causing further issues.